G'day you mob, welcome to this episode of Pete vs Plants. I am Pete and these are the plants. Today we're going to be doing some deconstructing and some exploration. So I put together these moss poles we have here. I think it's called a Snow Queen here in Australia, but you guys overseas in North America call this Njoy, I think. But it's just Epipremnum aureum, variegated version. We have here a heartleaf philodendron, but it's a Brazil. Again, variegated, it sort of has this lime variegation that sometimes kind of comes out yellow, depending on the plant, and probably light exposure. And then over here, just some normal heartleaf philodendrons. And I think I have two different types on here. There is the standard, I think cordatum is one, the smaller one here on the back. And the one that has really large leaves, I think is heterasium, Philodendron cordatum and hederaceum. So I have these here. Now I'm wanting to chop them up because I'm not really overly attached to these guys and I just don't have enough space to be honest, and I would rather put other things on these poles, other more interesting plants that are going to size up. These were some of the first poles I put together when I started getting into moss poles. And yeah, I also think that they would look a lot better as baskets. So yeah, I guess we just pick one and start chopping, and I'll work out whether or not to keep the base plant, but I think for the most part I'm just going to water propagate. So yeah, I thought that might be interesting. So I don't know, which one do we begin with? I guess maybe the most boring of the lot, at least in my opinion, the standard heartleaf philodendron. Doesn't mean I don't like it, but yeah, okay, so hederaceum's this side. I just got to see where the hederaceum might actually be. I think hederaceum is actually the smaller leafed one by the looks of it. Yeah, it's this one here, whereas cordatum, the vines kind of curl around the pole. Or is that hederaceum on this side? No, this is cordatum. Cordatum is going up here. Yeah, this is cordatum, the big heart leaf. So I think if you're looking at Brazil, I think Brazil is hederaceum. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, I have to look this up, but I think this might be hederaceum as a variant of that with variegation, whereas I've noticed that the cordatum just gets extremely large leaves. At least the more it climbs. I'm not sure if you can see these, they're about 2/3 the size of my head, maybe, without the beard. Anyway, so I need to get some shears and start chopping. Okay, so we call these secateurs in Australia. I probably need to look up why, but I think you guys call them shears or cutters or something overseas. You will never hear shears or cutters here in Australia, really. It's going to be secateurs. Secateurs. All right, so I guess we will start with taking off the Velcro tape here that's been holding it to the pole, and it's going to be interesting to see whether or not these plants have grown into the pole. I've had a little bit of an issue with them actually rooting in, and I think I'm probably just not keeping the poles wet enough. I might be letting them dry out a little too much, but I'm not sure if you can see. You probably can't, but higher up the pole here, you can see it comes away from the pole and it just hasn't rooted into the pole. So yeah, I guess maybe we start from the top. This whole thing seems to not have rooted in. I wonder if it's just going to fall down. Yeah, it is. So here we go. I guess I'll just take it off here at this point. Ooh, right at the bottom here, it actually has slightly rooted in. We have this very tiny root that was actually inside. So yeah, I have to keep an eye on it, and I think that's probably also part of my problem, and the reason I'm wanting to downsize is just that I have way too many moss poles with plants on them, many of which I actually am really attached to, although they're not attached to the poles. Hopefully you see what I did there. And many that I'm not attached to, hence wanting to sort of chop them up because, yeah, I'm not too phased if they if they make it or not, you know. I mean, it's sorry to say, but some of these ones, like the heartleaf philodendrons, they're not as important to me as some of the other plants in the collection. But I would like to see them in baskets and just use them as decoration around the house. All right, so I'm just going to make these, for the most part, one-leaf cuttings. And I guess I'll just leave them all in a pile to kind of callus over. So I might also just leave some sort of relatively large internodes on these guys, and I am going to water propagate them. They have such huge leaves that I don't know if I have prop boxes sort of big enough to be able to deal with this many cuttings, especially when I get into the Brazil. And I don't want to, I could put these into the aeroponics clone station and that would get them to root within probably a few weeks, but I kind of don't want all of that real estate in the clone station taken up with these cuttings when I have quite a lot of other things that I want to get in there to root and then sell, hopefully. But I don't think many people are after these. And if they were, they would probably just go to Bunnings or a local nursery to get them. So yes, I'll leave these over there. And I have to work out, I guess, how far down the plant I actually cut it and if I want to try and take the plant out of the pot here and pot it up in another pot, or if I just want to chop it all the way to the base and just keep all the cuttings and not worry about the base. So that does sort of feel like a bit of a waste. I might just do that, to be honest. We'll just have all cuttings. Oh, the cuttings. I wonder if I can just be lazy and pull this plant right out of the soil. No, it's pretty well rooted in there. All right, I'm going to take a few more cuttings. There's another 2. And I always recommend, guys, if you don't have a lot of cutting experience, if you're working on your chops with propagation, just go to a local Bunnings, so a hardware store, a big box store, a nursery, and buy some of these plants that have heaps and heaps and heaps of leaves on them, you know, lots and lots of nodes. Yeah, okay, so that's actually quite a decent plant. I guess I could, you know, yeah, maybe I just take it out. I've already started making a mess on the table, so perhaps we just, the mat's there. I won't be lazy, I'll get the mat out. Okay, I do need to order a smaller mat. My eyes were definitely too big for my stomach when I first got into plants and decided, you know, I need a really big mat to take up a lot of space, but the problem is that it takes up a lot of space. So every time now I want to do any propagating or anything, I kind of don't want to get the mat out because it's going to have to, you know, unfold over I think it's about 1 meter squared. So it's just too big. All right, so I guess maybe I take the cordatum cuttings first and then cut it down to the base. All right, no, hederaceum cuttings. All right, they're the ones that I've got left. This guy, and this guy also didn't root onto the moss pole. So yeah, I think in future I'm really gonna have to focus on keeping the moss pole as wet as possible. Okay, how many cuttings have I got here? And the growth point looks like this is a weird one. The growth point here, I don't know if that's a growth point or what, but there's something poking out like halfway up this internode here. It's not down where the leaf normally comes out, but it's actually higher up there. I'm not sure. That's weird. So these are hederaceum, the other ones are cordatum. Okay, I guess that's a tip cutting. It looks like 2 leaves have come out of the same node. That's interesting. I don't see that often, unless there are somehow 2 nodes really close together, but that looks like 2 that have come out of the same spot. Yeah, that's really weird, and this one doesn't have a sheath on it. It's just a leaf on a petiole, whereas this has that sheath that the growth point has come out of. Have you seen that before, guys? That's really interesting. That's just smooth. There's no sheath on it at all. Interesting. All right, I guess that's growth tip cutting. Forgive me if I cough a little bit, guys. I'm still sick and my parents both have COVID. I did a test today and it came back negative, so I don't think I've got COVID. I'm pretty sure I've had it in the past, probably about 2 or 3 months ago, because I was in bed for about 3 days with one of the worst colds that I've ever had. Again, I did tests and didn't prove and didn't come up as positive, but yeah, the symptoms and everything and the way that I felt was just like, surely this is COVID. This feels absolutely horrendous. Okay, I just have to try and remember which way around these guys are. So the half chopped leaf is the cordatum. Remember that, Pete. Okay, so I'm just gonna pull these guys out. And the good thing is, I'm gonna hopefully be able to reuse the moss pole. And probably the soil too, you know, it's probably fine to reuse, at least with plants that aren't that important. The only thing I found that's really interesting, I try and use these mesh screens at the bottom of the pots to keep everything in, but I have found that the roots tend to grow through them. I was sort of hoping originally that the holes would be small enough that the roots would kind of be too chunky and stay sort of encouraged to remain in the soil, but they do seem to grow through, which is a bit of a pain in the butt because I don't like doing damage to them, but it's almost unavoidable once you take this out, as you can see. Okay, so, whoa, this big dude here is hederaceum, the base plant. Which one was this that I took out to the side? I'm gonna have to relook. I think this was cordatum, wasn't it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was cordatum. Bugger. The good thing is at the bottom here you can see that the roots have all grown into the base of the moss pole, and they've even started growing up into the moss. So I'm going to see if I can gently coax these out. This is cordatum as well. And I am going to take the bark out of the bottom of the moss pole here and just put this aside to use for something later. Okay, so I guess I need some pots, and I can probably reuse a bunch of this soil to pot up these plants too. All right. So I'm gonna chuck some of the really chunky bits of bark at the bottom. And then I guess this one will be the hederaceum one. And you can see it's got a massive root mass, so hopefully that kicks back into action, and then by the time the other cuttings are rooted, I can pot them all up together and just have one big basket of hederaceum. Okay, so I guess I will leave that here. Geez, that needs more soil. It's too chunky. It's not getting down to the bottom. Okay, hederaceum. Now, before I get on to the others, I guess I will chuck these cuttings into water. And again, I'm not sure, do I even bother letting them callus over? Is it that important? Take the sheath off. That's just gonna rot. This one will be interesting, trying to get it in there. And I'm just sort of arranging the leaves to kind of overlap slightly with one another, but not completely, so that they all hopefully, or at least as much as possible, get exposure to a decent amount of light. And you obviously want to make sure that the nodes are far enough down in your pot that they are going to be submerged in water. So there you go, you end up with a little sort of bouquet like this. I'm sure you know the deal. And before I do anything else, I'm going to label that one as well. And I'm just going to chuck it in there, and we will fill that with water in a bit. Now, the next one, chuck some of these chunks in there, is the cordatum here. So I've already taken 2 cuttings that had roots attached. So I guess we just shove this all back in here. Hopefully they fit. It's probably going to be pretty root bound in here already, but space is starting to get limited, so I'm not too phased. And I'm going to try and find a little bit of the finer soil. I've got a really chunky bark in here. I was sort of testing that out to see how it would go. And it seemed to be fine. The roots were obviously doing well, and the plant didn't suffer from root rot from getting overwatered. So that probably means that the ultra chunkiness was allowing a lot of that excess water to flow through, which is good. But I obviously wasn't utilizing it enough because I didn't keep the moss pole wet enough to encourage the roots from the plant to grow in. The only thing that's been really sort of blowing my mind a little bit, making me a bit confused, is that I have had moss poles where I've been spraying them down each day or every second day superficially, like on the outside with just my water sprayer. And I found that sometimes the roots still rot off, and I wasn't sure if that was because I was spraying them down and the moss was getting too wet on the outside right next to those roots for too long, or if it was that water was evaporating away and the moss pole was still too dry, and so the roots would try and grow into the pole, and internally they would be still just too dry, even if externally they were kind of getting a little bit of water every single day. So that was sort of one of my issues that I was coming across. Now, I'm just going to put the little tag in here so I know what I've got. I guess, I'm trying to think of what I can use for this guy. I thought we're gonna have so much fun with this Brazil, because there's gonna be hundreds of cuttings, I think, literally hundreds, coming off this thing. Maybe not hundreds, but dozens. And so I don't know what sort of vessel I'm gonna be able to chuck it into so that they all get submerged and so that there isn't, you know, a huge amount of water. Might have to use a bucket. Hopefully my voice holds up too, guys. Sorry if it's a bit raspy. I'm coughing like an animal. Okay. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm just gonna cut a bit more of this node off so that this one is submerged. I would really love for this node to be submerged as well, because those roots will really take off. But I have a feeling that's just gonna be too much, and the length of this leaf, the petiole, isn't gonna be high enough so that these can be submerged, and I don't think I can cut this yet because that leaf is coming out. Oh well, I guess we'll see what happens. So I'll chuck this guy in, and then the last one here. Boom, look at these leaves. This one was crazy. It's gonna be interesting to see if these go off really quickly. So there's that bouquet. I need another label, so that is cordatum. P. cordatum. My chicken scratch writing, and I'm just going to chuck that in there and leave that over the side for now. The soil in these was already sort of moist, so I probably don't need to water them. I might just chuck them up on the rack. On the rack! Sounds like I'm going to torture them. I'm going to grab my soil bucket to take this soil off the mat. What I might have to do with this soil is actually bake it. I haven't tried that yet, but apparently that's a way you can disinfect your soil. It's that you just chuck it in the oven, and I think it was about 100 degrees Celsius or more, and you just leave it in there for 10 to 20 minutes, and it just bakes the soil, obviously killing pretty much anything and everything that's in there. The only issue you may have is that if you have roots left over in the soil, even if you bake them, obviously you're going to kill everything in there, but once you bring the soil out of the oven, you're going to end up with microbes repopulating that, and they're probably going to be eating all of the dead roots that are left over. All right, enjoy time. I think we're going to enjoy chopping up this Njoy. Okay, so I guess we do the same thing, where I will chop as much up as possible first, and then we'll take the base plants and pot them up. Where is the Velcro? Off you come. It's so funny too, like when I first started getting into plants, you had all this space at home that you were sort of like, oh man, I can't wait to fill up this jungle. Now, I'm kind of a bit more like, oh my God, I need more space. There's too much of a jungle. So it is sort of funny how it ebbs and flows, and you have to kind of adjust. And I guess that's one of the big things. Don't be afraid to adjust dramatically, you know, like this. For a while I was like, do I really want to chop these up? But then I'm like, yes, because you'll be able to put other things in, you know, on the poles. You'll be able to grow other things in the spaces these guys were taking up. Same thing here, although interestingly, some of these actually have grown into the pole, which is really cool. So there are a whole bunch here. Up the top here, it looks like there's been a few little nodes that have grown in. Same down the bottom, but not extensively, not really extensively. And this is something I'm sort of curious about too. I wonder if with Epipremnums and the Philodendrons, the sort of the Pothos, I wonder if initially they're actually difficult to get to kind of root in there when they're smaller vines, but as they get bigger and bigger and bigger, as they get more vertical, the roots get chunkier and don't desiccate as quickly. They don't dry out as quickly, so they can get into the moss pole and just, you know, survive a lot more easily. You guys will have to let me know. That's just a theory that I have. I reckon that's what's going to happen. I've got a marble queen over here, and it's sized up really quickly as it's growing up the pole. The vines are now probably the what do I want to say, width, the circumference of my pinky finger, and they were probably at the bottom more like this size. But the roots now are really chunky towards the top, so I have a feeling they're probably going to have a much better time of rooting into the moss pole. Sorry, it's getting a bit dicey down here. The nodes are actually kind of close together. And I'm unsure how much do I really want to chop this guy up. Do I really need 1,000 different cuttings? Maybe I'll just use a few 2-node ones. Okay, how's this one gone? So this one actually grew into the pole with a growth point. I wonder if I can pull this whole thing out intact. There you go. Look at that. So I think what happened was, so I took a cutting off the top here because it was doing this weird thing where it was growing, the vine was like this, but the point had kind of arced all the way around. I think it was because originally when I bought it, it had been sort of wrapped around a trellis or a pole or something. And because it had this arc in the vine, the hormone, the auxin hormone, which is the thing that activates these nodes, because that part of the arc was sort of, with multiple nodes was sort of close to the top like this, it had actually activated a whole bunch of different nodes and they were all growing up. And even one that had done the whole loop and was coming back up was also taking off. So I ended up chopping that to try and clean it up, but it activated the node below as well as the one above it. Although this is the one that sort of took off as this one grew into the moss pole. Into the moss and obviously ran out of light. Okay, chop, chop, chop. Do we bother? How many do I really want here? No, let's turn that to 2. I mean, I'm gonna have heaps of Njoy. It's gonna be interesting to see how this one goes because it does have sort of varying root development on some of these nodes. You'll have these like, nothing, and then a bit more, and then actually grown into the pole and is functioning as a root. So I assume those ones that have roots that are functioning really well are actually gonna, in the water propagation, are gonna do really, really well. What do I do with this wet stick? Do I bother? I guess I can just chuck it into a prop box. There you go, 3 wet sticks. It's so funny, I feel so bad ever throwing anything out. I don't know what you guys are like, but anytime I propagate anything, I don't just want to kind of take what I need as a propagation. I kind of want to use everything possible. I feel bad if I have nodes that could potentially become plants at some point in the future and I throw them away. You guys will have to let me know if you're sort of the same. Oof, it looks like we've got some plants down the bottom here that have grown roots. So I'm just gonna chop the vines off those. I guess we'll deal with those when we unpot. Some more cuttings. I guess it would be kind of cool to use these to do an experiment. I should try that. I should think about whether or not I want to do an experiment and use a bunch of these. That's why I actually ended up buying all of these guys, and I have quite a few baskets of different plants. I wanted to have access to something that I could just harvest a lot of cuttings off and then potentially try different methods of, say, propagation or, does this work better than that? And this is interesting. There's actually a vine here at the bottom that's grown along the soil, and each of the nodes seems to have rooted into the soil. So I guess we'll leave that one there. And I'll chop this one here. This one has, again, that one grew into the pole, but not extensively. I guess my expectation was that once the roots got into the pole, they would just go berserk, right? They would just go off. But that is not what I have currently seen. And I think it's just Sydney Plant Guy, man. If you guys are following him on Instagram and YouTube, his stuff just seems to be perfect. And it's one of those things where he's obviously put in a lot of work, effort, sweat, blood, tears, money to master this, and probably shows his wins a lot more than his failures. Although he is pretty transparent with how things go for him, and that it's taken a lot of work and effort. But it's always just amazing seeing how well his plants root into his pole. So he has clearly gotten his method down, and it's just perfect. At least, as good as it could be for anyone, it seems. But he also lives in Sydney, which has a very nice, humid, warm climate compared to where I live down in Melbourne, near Bass Strait. Down sort of halfway between, I guess, Sydney and Tasmania. Okay. More cuttings. Jesus, it's going to be funny to if all of these root. It might be really interesting to do an analysis of just how many cuttings actually take off. And this is an interesting one. I was going to chop above here, but this is actually a spent node. I don't know if you can see, that's the main stem, and then this is branched out. So if I chop there, this cutting would root, but it would actually not grow because it wouldn't have a node to activate if I removed this one to take it as a cutting. So I guess we'll just leave that one as is. And then I think everything else in here we might just leave in the pot. And what I am gonna do, and I'm not sure how easy this is gonna be to see, the vine that's grown along the ground, I'm thinking of actually chopping up each of those internodal spaces because each one seems to have, I'll see if I can angle this to show you. See that vine down the bottom there? That's grown in roots from each of those nodes into the soil. And if I chop each of them, they should all activate and have all their own growth points. Guess I'll do that after I take this guy out. So easiest thing might be, what do I put these guys in? Because I feel like I've got some jars here, but I don't think this is going to be a sort of large enough diameter to handle all these cuttings. I think we're going to run out of space in terms of the diameter here, the width. Stepping on perlite. So I think what I might do is use one of my wife's smoothie cups that we get every single morning when I take her to work, and just chuck everything in there. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. I assume though that because there are just so many cuttings in here, and I'm not going to bother with rooting hormone or anything like that, guys, to be honest, I assume they're just going to go nuts. I've done that in the past with, I think it was Monstera siltepecana. I chopped up an entire vine. No, it may have been multiple vines off of a basket of it that I have, and it just went berserk. It just went berserk. I think within 2 weeks, the roots were like that. And I assume that a part of it is just the plant's very easy to root, but also it had so many cuttings in there pushing the hormones out into the water that it was just like, yes, too easy, mate. You want us to push out roots? Done and done. Oh my God. This is not easy when you have so many cuttings. I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I might have to use multiple cups. That might be an easier option. I need something that has just got loads and loads of width. At the top, the diameter is huge so that I can just chuck everything in. Oh my God. This is ridiculous. Talk about overkill. I wonder if it matters if a bunch of these get submerged completely. I should be counting these, sorry guys. Needless to say, there is quite a lot. Okay. This might not even fit in this cup. I should probably use this as the thumbnail, guys. But look at that. These are all the cuttings. So I guess we'll see how we go. I might put water in here first and then just wedge them in. So give me a sec. Oh man, perfect. Too easy. Talk about overkill. There you go. Maybe that'll be the thumbnail. There we go. Whoop. What was I doing? I was trying to get a better angle on it so you guys could see the leaves. I just poured some of the water out because it's like right at the top there. God, I'm a dag. Anyway, yeah, so I guess that's it. I guess we'll see how we go, but I reckon this is probably going to root very quickly. It's almost like a lettuce. All right, I don't think I need to label that one. I think I'll work out what it is. I guess we take these guys out of the pole, and I might just grab a towel and deal with that water. And I have to think what I'm going to do with the wet sticks too. Do I care enough to keep those? I guess I'll just chuck them into a propagation bin that I have somewhere. I'm trying to think. I'm looking around the room. I emptied out a bunch recently, as you'll know, with all of the prop box videos that I did. That's something that future Pete can work out. Okay, let's see if we can Oh, feels like this thing's pretty well rooted in here, which is, again, a good sign. Woo! Yeah, wow, okay. So it did a pretty decent job. Let's get rid of this tape. Same thing again with the roots going through the gauze at the bottom here, but it does look like the roots are a little finer with this guy, so I wonder if I can slide them through. Nah, they've kind of fluffed out once they go through the actual gauze, so easier said than done. All right, so can I take these off the pole easily enough? There's some roots here that have gone in. Can I coax them out without breaking them? I don't think I'm going to be able to. I think if you really, really cared about these plants and you were wanting to propagate them as well as possible, that's interesting. That did actually root right into the pole and off the node here. So maybe there's a lot more moisture obviously down the bottom here, and it finds it a lot easier to, yeah, this one's done the same thing. That whole root there was grown right into the pole, so that's pretty cool. And you can actually see a whole bunch down below the surface here that have grown into it, and I'm just going to pull out and try and remember not to mix back into the soil. All right, trying to remove a bunch of this soil. Good thing is the soil comes out pretty easily and the moss stays in the pole, and it'll actually dry out and store pretty well. I found the poles, after you've used them, you just put them somewhere and within a day or two they should dry out, and yeah, they can be reused in the future. And again, if you're really paranoid about contaminating plants, taking the moss, you could potentially leave it in situ, potentially put boiling water in your bath or something and just sink the poles into that and sit them there for 10-20 minutes. Otherwise you could just take the moss out, put it in a sink or something with boiling water. Same thing, I don't think I'd bake it. I have a feeling you'd end up with some burnt moss, but you could try that and you could let me know how that goes. Okay, so here's the vine that I was talking about with all of these nodes that have activated. So I'm not sure whether or not to bother chopping this up or if I just leave it as is in the pot. I might just do that, and I can always chop it up later. And it's the same thing here. This one's grown up with roots coming up the vine here, so I might just put it on its side like so, hoping the roots grow down into the medium. And I'm just going to be lazy and bunch these guys kind of all up together in a sort of aesthetically pleasing way, at least as aesthetically pleasing as possible. Nailed it. Fucking crushed it. Crushed it, Pete. And I guess we'll chuck this into a slightly bigger pot. Okay, so some of this chunkiness into the pot already, and then pick it all up, chuck it all in, and what I'm going to try and do is get this dude below the surface to kind of bend around the pot and make sure those roots stay sort of snugly tucked beneath the surface so they don't dry out. So I guess we'll see how that goes. But what you could do is effectively just let that sit for maybe a week or two and then chop those nodes up. So just use some scissors on the top, just go bang, bang, bang. And as long as those roots are sort of deep enough in the soil there and they're getting nutrients and moisture, they should all survive as their own little plants, which is another really, it's kind of like air layering, but with soil, right? So you can actually air layer, but by chucking soil into, you know, Glad wrap or cups or whatever it is that you want to chuck around the nodes. And as long as you keep it wet and, you know, aerated, theoretically, the plant should root into it, and you can then just chop the nodes up and get, you know, new plants coming out. So you're effectively doing that, but just horizontally instead of vertically. Okay, so the other thing you could do too is potentially put moss on the top here if you wanted to keep a bit of moisture near the surface, because I found when you do that with moss, the soil doesn't dry out as quickly just below the moss. The moss might dry out, but the soil below it doesn't dry out immediately. Unlike, obviously, if there's no moss layer, you'll end up with the top layer of soil just drying out almost immediately, which is, yeah, it's what convection does, right? The air movement and evaporation just sucks all of the moisture out. Okay, so I think that's kind of good enough. My hands are definitely muddy because this soil was a bit wet, but I'm just trying to make sure none of these roots at the top are exposed. And I think we're all good, guys. So that should take off, and there may be as many as 10 or so different shoots in here once we chop things up. And when we get all of these other ones rooted, I think it's going to be an epic basket. I think we should have a basket with potentially like 50 growth points, which would just be nuts. Assuming, again, they all survived. They won't. But that would be really cool if we can get that to happen. And then pop them up together. All right, so same thing again here. I'm just going to find my little soil bucket. Try and remove as many of these roots as possible that I can see here, just so that you get rid of as much of that rotting material as possible, seeing as they're no longer attached to the plant. And chuck the soil back into the box for use later. It's funny too, I can see a whole bunch of bugs in here, like millipedes and everything. So I'm not sure if you can see, I've got a little dude on my thumb there, a little white millipede. And I actually don't have a problem with that sort of stuff, guys. Those guys, you know, it's probably really good actually for the soil to have as many, you know, bugs in it as possible that aren't harming the plant. Again, I'm assuming that those millipedes aren't eating the plant. From what I understand, they're sort of vegetarians that eat all of the rotting detritus material. So they're actually probably really helpful. If you can cultivate a good kind of little biological, ecological system like that with some of those good bugs, they're probably going to deal with a lot of the food that pests like fungus gnats would actually feed on and lead to, you know, a worse outbreak. So don't be afraid if you find bugs in there. And something I should mention too is I had a bit of a freak out a while back because one of my elbow cuttings up here, I was frequently misting the moss around the base of it because I was worried that the aerial roots that were going down into the soil would dry up. That tends to not be a problem. They'll get into the soil, they don't care. But I was noticing every time I misted it and made it moist, all these little mites came out and they look like spider mites. They're about the same size, but they were brown. So if you ever see that though, it turns out they're soil mites. The genus starts with O. I've forgotten what it is. I'll try and put it on the screen if I remember. But from what I understand, they're actually harmless, and I noticed, I was watching them really carefully. They were climbing up the plant's base, but then coming straight back down. So that's how I think I worked out they're probably not harming the plant at all. They're just hanging around the base of the plant, eating all the detritus material. And so, yeah, but I did take some photos and was telling friends and putting them in Facebook groups and being like, what the fuck is this? Do I need to, you know, call in the big guns and try and exterminate these little dudes, or are they harmless? But then when I looked up, oh, soil mites, okay, and then found out they're not actually a problem, I stopped panicking. Oh, and there's another little dude here, a little millipede. So there must be somehow I must have picked up a millipede in the soil and it's laid eggs and there's a lot of babies in there doing the work, eating up everything. All right, so just wash my hands and drying them off so that they can get dirty again. But, are you spider mites? God, I keep seeing like webs all over the place on different plants. And I keep freaking out thinking, oh my God, I've got a spider mite infestation. But then quite often I've looked a little closer and I haven't actually seen any spider mites. They've just been webs or dust that have been just blowing around and that are built up, usually on the sinus, above the sinus of leaves. So you'll see little strands. But I think if they're kind of like sparsely there, like if you just see one or two and there's dust attached to it, you don't have too much to worry about. It's when you see a real dense mesh, net, hammock looking thing around that area and on the leaf or under the leaf that you need to sort of then panic. Okay, so yeah, you can see that I had a bit of a fungus gnat problem. Though the good news is I've had these in my plants for probably about 2 months, and that's about 2 months worth, at least out of this pot and whatever was nearby it. And I think it was actually like that within the first week, you know, thereabouts, and it hasn't gotten any worse for a month or so. And it's because I was using tannin, which is, I've mentioned this before, but it's crystals. You use like a drop of it in every litre of water or 2 litres of water that you put together for watering, obviously. What else are you gonna do for drinking or smoking? But yeah, you do that and the little larvae of the fungus gnats end up eating the soil or whatever it is that has this water on it, and the crystals expand inside the little bugs and cause them to explode from the inside out. So yeah, that seems to be working really well. It's quite expensive. You get like a little eyedropper. I got one near me. No, I actually have eye drops near me because I've got hay fever, but it's about this size. And it's lasted ages. I've got 2 of them somewhere, and I've only actually gone through probably about 1/3 of one, and I probably made up like 100 litres of water already. So I've done heaps of drops, but it's, how many mil would that be? What's this? This is 10 mil. It's probably about 20 mil a bottle. So I don't know how much a drop is, but yeah, needless to say, it's lasted a long time. All right. But yeah, definitely recommend using Tanlin. The other thing that I've used in conjunction with that is Raid, I think Raid insecticide plugs, the ones that you stick into electrical outlets, faucets, not faucets, what is it that you guys call them in America? I always get confused because we don't use this terminology. Anyway, you know what I mean. You plug them into the wall and they, I think, are on a timer and just release a mist or gas or liquid or something that the bugs, you know, ingest it and cark it. So that seems to have worked well. I have like 4 or 5 of those around the house, and I use Tanlin for watering pretty much everything. The moss poles, the soil, whatever it is, it's just in the system and it's non-toxic, at least for anything that doesn't ingest it, that isn't a fungus gnat. So it seems to be fine. All right, I'm looking up at this monstrosity of a Brazil, and it has rooted in at some points. So that's cool to see. It has actually done a pretty good job. Not gonna lie. All right, so I'll see, there's sort of water coming out of the bottom, so I don't wanna bring it down too far. But there are some nodes here that, I still can't really show you, here that are actually solidly attached to the pole. So this one has actually done a lot better than I was expecting, and I was kind of losing hope because the top here, again, I don't know if I can show you. It was, yeah, it's just growing out of control, and the roots seem to sort of come out alive. They last for a little while and then they dry up and die. And so you kind of have to be quick with trying to get them to go into the pole. All right, I guess we'll just start chopping. I'm gonna clean up some of this water down the bottom that's coming out of the bottom of the pot because I did water these this week. Ugh, mess. I guess we'll just start chopping. All right. Man, we are gonna have so many cuttings. If half of these take, we're gonna have so many Brazil growth points in this basket. It's gonna be epic. And I don't know how much of these sheaths to take off. I don't know how much I can be bothered doing that with every single node, but I do know that they're all gonna rot in the water if I don't. Do I leave that like that? Yeah, I guess I can. All right, I guess I'll just pile these up and I'll try and remember to sort of chop the nodes down a little bit. Otherwise they get kind of squishy inside the whatever vessel I end up using. And I think, oof, that sap's sticky. I think I'm gonna end up using this for these guys. This was so annoying. So I get these from Kmart. This is like a really cheap local clothes and house stuff store. House stuff, a really good description there, Pete. You know what I mean? You get clothes and toys and stuff for your house that's, you know, usually very, 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 very cheap. So Kmart is what we tend to go to for cheap shit, especially for young kids that just absolutely demolish anything you give them. Toys, clothes, whatever it is, they destroy it. So I'm like, yeah, they're not getting Chanel or Gucci, you know, fuck that. They can have Kmart. Anyway, so I bought a bunch of these. These were $2 a pop. And they're just vases, right? Vases. And annoyingly, I put them in, I think I bought 10 of them and I had them all stacked. And when I was driving home, one fell sideways and this chunk came out, but I was like, you know what, fuck that. I'm gonna duct tape this puppy up. It's still good. I want my $2 worth. So yeah, and I think I've already used this for propagation before. You can see the super glue here coming down the side. So yeah, don't worry too much, guys. You gotta be industrious, right? You gotta waste not, want not. I could have just thrown that straight out, but yeah, fuck that. All right. I'm gonna see if I can get these guys off the moss pole, the ones that have been rooted in, but I have a feeling I'm probably going to destroy the roots in here because this pole is actually, oh no, okay. Yeah, I did actually rip them. Thought they came out really easily. Yeah, snap. Okay, boom. Oh man, we're gonna have so many of these and so many of these internodal spaces. Okay, yeah. I guess they had kind of attached, but the roots weren't really that extensive, or they've broken off. I'm not sure. when I pulled them out, but Jesus, tons. Okay, keep going, work my way down. So this is actually multiple plants. I ended up grabbing multiple plants because I think I pulled up one plant originally and it just looked really sad because it wasn't very, this one's really rooted in quite well. Oof. Okay, so that had pretty substantial roots in the pole. And I'm going to try and take the moss off, obviously, as best I can. Though these roots seem to have somewhat rotted tips, which isn't a good sign. And that could be too much watering. So that's the hardest thing I think I've found personally, guys, is working out the best watering routine for moss poles. So if you guys have any advice whatsoever, please do not be afraid to leave it down in the comments, as I always say, I'm still learning. I would love to get your feedback and experience and knowledge. Everything that you can give me so that I can excel as quickly as possible in this hobby of growing plants up poles. No, that's all right. I was going to say, it looks like we had another 2 out of the same node, but what's happened here is the original vine was coming up here and this one's been activated out to the side here. And that's why we have these 2 things coming out of the same node. Okay, this one actually rooted in really well too. Oh wow, really well, cool. So it is funny, there'll be a whole bunch of nodes here that haven't done anything, and then for whatever reason, one was in the right position or under the right conditions and then grows these roots into the pole. So I would love to be able to replicate that at every single node, ideally. That's why I guess I'm kind of annoyed with myself, because as you can see here, there's a whole bunch of nodes with nothing. Chop, 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 my God. Go, go, go. Man, the smell is so strong. It's almost, there's like this faint smell of dog food. I don't know why that's come to mind, but it doesn't smell the same as when I was chopping up the Soderoy and Brantianum. They seem to be as philodendrons. Ooh, wow, okay. Closer. It's almost spicy the closer you get. Yeah, that almost has a spicy tinge to it. Interesting. But yeah, I was chopping up the brandies and Soderoys and that had a very peppery kind of smell. Yeah, I'll have to look into why that's the case. There must be some compounds that evaporate straight out of the plant when it's sap, right? When you're chopping it up like this. The volatile compounds, and yeah, for one reason or another, they have this really strong smell. I wonder if it's like to ward things off, like if you've got insects biting into the plant. If you had really stinky sap, it's probably a beneficial thing if it gets rid of the bugs. And that's why I think peppermint pops up in a lot of places in biology. You'll often find like bugs spray peppermint from the back of their heads. Things like, I think these are stick insects that actually have glands at the back of their head that spray peppermint. And they'll spray it into the face of whatever's attacking them. And in the bug world, at least, peppermint is a very gross, undesirable, sort of toxic smell, and I think it probably it feels like acid if they get it on themselves. So they often use this to be able to escape any predators. However, I feel like as a human, you'd probably walk up and just use that, that could be like what cavemen used back in the day to freshen up their breath before a date. Just go into the bush and try and find some stick insects and just, give them a flick and then, they'll be like, sweet. Colgate's not going to be invented for another 3,000 years. We're sweet, mate. Good old, what's the name that you would give a cave woman? I don't know, but yeah. What am I smoking? Oh well, guys, if you're not laughing, at least I'm laughing at my jokes. All right, Jesus. Talk about a chore, guys. There are going to be so many cuttings. I've got a little mountain here. Let's see if you guys can see. This is the mountain I currently have of Brazil cuttings. Alright, still going. I think the reason that I'm having such a fun time with this, in terms of how many cuttings I have, is because when I did buy a bunch of plants, see, this is what sort of makes me shit myself sometimes. I don't know if you can see that. There's a web there. Obviously you can see things stuck in it. But I have a feeling that's actually a spider web because, yeah, it was this plant. There was a spider that was living at the bottom of this plant that I just kind of let do its thing because it was taking out all the fungus gnats. I can't even remember what I was talking about. Yeah, when I bought these, I made sure that when I got some of these plants that they were multiple planted plants, if that makes sense, so that they had multiple growth points coming out of them for when I chuck them on a moss pole here. This one might actually be useless. You see that? There's stem rot on one side of it, and I'm not sure where the growth point is. So if I pull out one of these, I'm not sure if the growth point is on the side of the leaf or on the other side of the plant. It's on the other side. So that, see that, what am I going to show you here? See that little claw there? I think that's the growth point, right? The apical bud that hasn't been activated, and the leaf's on the other side. So I have a feeling that this one is useless because the apical bud has rotted away. Let's have a look. If I pull this off, yeah, that's useless. Nothing there. Bugger. We've lost one. What a tragedy. What a tragedy, guys. Hopefully the rest make it and we can still have some Brazil in our collection. All right. Jesus Christ. This is going to be such a lush basket. All right, is that enough? I think it's probably enough, guys. I probably don't need to take these right down to the base. Okay, so do I put water in this first? Probably should. I'm going to put some water in it. Okay, bottoms up. So, oh my God, you got to see this, guys. Let's see if I can lift this up for you. This is what we're working with. I'm going to try and bunch everything together as best I can and just make sure that all of the tips are below the water, because that's about all that matters. I think it's probably fine if you have some leaves submerged. It probably doesn't matter too much. It probably only matters if it's, you know, for months and months and months and months, if it takes forever for them to root, because the longer they're under there, the more likely they are to rot, I reckon. I don't think I'm going to have big enough hands to deal to deal with this batch. I might end up having to use 2 vases. Okay, Jesus Christ. Overkill. So, yeah, it's going to be fun watching this. I did say I was going to pull off all the sheaths, but I think I have kind of given up on that idea because, again, I'm just being lazy, and I guess we'll see what happens. You know, see if it's a big problem. I'm guessing they're going to rot off within the first week or 2. And, oh, it's an awkward one. And, yeah, I might just have to pull everything out and change the water if it becomes putrid. Oh my God. I'm having to like pile them up on top of my hand here. I don't know why this is so funny to me, guys, but you'll have to let me know how many cuttings you've ever squeezed into a single propagation vessel from a single type of plant. What's your max? What's your record? Because I reckon this is definitely going to be mine. Oh my God. Oh, I don't think I've got big enough hands to deal with this. I'm starting to drop them. It's ridiculous. Come on. We're getting so close to all of them, guys. So I hope I can stack them all up on top of one another and then just squeeze them into the top here. Fingers crossed. I think we've got about 10 left. Jesus. Oh my God. We did it, guys. All right, let's see if we can take the sheath off. All right. That's what we're working with. So I'm going to see if I can get this whole lot down far enough into the water here. I don't want to damage any of the leaves, but I think we should be all good. I'm just sort of pushing a little bit on everything to make sure that it gets down in there. Oh my God, this is ridiculous. It's like a really, really well stuffed bouquet. Okay. I might have to really fill it up with water. So there's about an inch of space there. Yeah, and I can smell that spicy, peppery kind of smell That is really unique. Oh, Jesus Christ, yeah. It's almost like, it's like celery and like chili pepper or something that's been put together. All right, so I guess there we are, guys. This is gonna be interesting. I might just end up chucking this on a windowsill or under my grow lights, I don't know. We'll see if I can find some real estate, but that's pretty crazy, and I'll just have to keep an eye on it. I really need like a dish. I think there's, you know, way too much volume here of water, I think, for trying to get as high a concentration of the hormones as possible. But yeah, this is about, I think, the only vessel that I could use that would be able to contain all of these together. So I'm gonna see if I can put a bit more water in this. It's right at the top. Oh, Jesus. Okay, I think we're good. We've got about a centimetre gap there, guys. So I reckon, yeah, I don't reckon that would have been hundreds of cuttings. I think it's probably about 50 or so, maybe a few more. So again, don't need to label that one. I think I'll know what it is. And last but not least, I guess we will take these guys out and pop them up. I'll just make some space. What am I going to chuck them into? I probably have to use another one of these 10 centimetre pots. No, looks like it's a 14 centimetre pot. So here we go. Now I think from memory these actually have quite a substantial root base. Root ball. I guess we'll see how we go. And it looks like there's quite a bit of moisture in here. So did it grow into... No. It didn't grow too badly into the mesh here that I had at the bottom. Let's take the moss pole off. Okay, plant did grow a little bit into the moss pole, at least the soil here at the base. Let's give it a few taps to get these soil chunks out. See, it's that easy. Take it away, let it dry, reuse later. I'm just gonna precariously balance it there. And you know what? Save this moss for later as well. I'm separating out all my pins too. All the pins that I was using, I'll reuse those. Waste not, want not, guys. Okay. So, oof, what a chunky root. Look at that. What a beast. All right, so I guess we'll have our two plants here. Yep, so they're the two root balls. I think they're probably in slightly too big a pot, but I think the problem that I had when I put these guys together was that the root ball was way too big in one of them when put in there next to the moss pole, and with the other plant, I couldn't fit them. I was trying to fit them on opposite sides of the pot, so yeah, I ended up having to use that bigger pot there at the bottom. I think it's probably a 20 centimetre pot, but it may have been slightly too big, although the roots look pretty healthy. It doesn't look like there's any sort of issues here with rot. All right, soil in there, probably a little bit too much as this is quite extensive. Sink it down, get these guys to about level with the top of the pot, and then look out for the sharp bits of bark that I put in here. Again, so that was an option that I was trying out, guys. I was actually just buying tan bark, and I found this at the local supermarket for $4 for, I think, like a 40-litre bag, and I was just like, that's too good to give up, right? Like, that is a lot of material that I can be chucking into my chunky mix. It is very, very chunky, but I felt like that was just, you know, too good to be true in terms of the what would you say, the price versus the volume of substrate that I got. I thought that was just a great deal. So I had been giving that a go with these plants, and it seems to have done pretty well so far. I haven't had any issues. If anything, it probably means that the plants need to be watered more frequently, although because of the other stuff that I mix in here, as you can see, it does stay moist. I think this was watered probably 3 days ago, maybe. So yeah, it just allows more of the water to go through it, the chunkier it is. Okay, what I am gonna do is use one of these little spikes or pins to hold down one of these growth points. And I think we're good. I think that's it, guys. There we go. So I think that's about as good as, oh no, We missed one, dudes. We'll get him in there. We'll get him in there later. But I think we've done pretty well. I think I've got here 1, 2, 3, 4 Pothos Njoy wet sticks that I need to chuck in a wet box, a prop box somewhere. But we've effectively used everything except for this one leaf on this dead node, this rotted out stem, and these, you know, internodal spaces that we ended up chopping up. We've done really, really well, guys. I'm actually, you know, pretty proud of myself that I managed to sort of reuse and save all this stuff. So hopefully we can convert these moss poles into baskets and get some really, really, really lush baskets and just, yeah, chuck them around the house as decorations, I guess. But yeah, I think that's about it for this one, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been a bit of a long one, so thank you for bearing with me and making it up to this point if you have. And I think you have to have if you're watching this currently, so a bit of an oxymoron. But yeah, YouTube reckons you're going to enjoy this video, guys. I hope I get to see you there next. And if you have anything to say or leave in the comments, please do. I'd always love your advice, so give me the deets, give me the knowledge, drop those bombs. See you next time.